they mentioned that Zane Yi was a founding father, but the founding mother is Abi Doukhan. Her incredible energy on the order of 13 years ago got this thing going. And I don't know if it's the same one as it was. I'm all confused after the last presentation. It has changed, and I think it's somewhat for the better. And it still has the same name. That's pretty much it could change its name, and it would, in my mind, still have the same identity. It's in some level, even though it's definitely changed over time. So you need to know that about her. She is also an associate professor of philosophy at Queens College at the city of New York, holds the Pearl and Nathan Helegua Family Initiative in Ethics and Tolerance. She has a master's from the Sorbonne and a PhD from the University of Nanterre in Paris. Her book-length publications include Emmanuel Levinas, A Philosophy of Exile, Biblical Portraits of Exile, and Womanist Wisdom in the Song of Songs, Secrets of an African Princess. And her talk today is titled Receiving versus Grasping, Rosenzweig and Levinas on the Creativity of the Human Subject, Creaturiality of the Human Subject. And we look forward to what you have to say, even though you say you're going to leave Levinas out of it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so the time is yours.
Thank you.
And the same format as in the previous session. 2 talks, they'll have 20 minutes to present and 20 minutes right after the presentation for discussion.
Okay, so it's nice to be here. It's changed so much since me and Zane started this. This is so much better. Oh my goodness, you have no idea. For one thing, there are women among us, which is amazing. And it's just, it's a young crowd. It's wonderful. I heard there were people from Andrews. Who are you? People from Andrews University. Wow, wow. I'm so proud of you. Yes. So yeah, this is amazing. Keep it like this is amazing. I have no words. Yes, so I came here in a snowstorm walking for 30 minutes, and then I had a good idea to buy a slushy, like a frozen drink. So now I'm frozen to the bone. So I will be, teaching you with the hat and the coat because I'm freezing. Okay, so my topic, receiving versus grasping. This is a topic I have been grappling with personally, which is why I decided to write a paper on it for those of us out there who are also grappling with this. I'll be talking about Rosenzweig. On the my God, me too, I can't say it. Creaturiality of the human subject. So one of the central tenets of Adventism is creation. We are big on creation. We write about creation. We keep the Sabbath, which is the memorial of creation. This is kind of what specifies our identity. But I doubt if we know very much what it means to be a creature. And today I want to go into that. What does it mean to be a creature, right? This is a topic on anthropology, on what it means to be human, and I'm going to focus on what it means to be a creature, and I'm going to focus on the notion of receptivity, which is intrinsically associated with being a creature. And this is something which I believe we struggle with as Westerners, especially. We have lost the ability to receive. So I'll go into this paper. Obviously, it's based on Genesis 1 and 2 with the notion of creation, but I will be weaving in Rosenzweig, who is a 19th century Jewish philosopher who has spoken about creation. And then I will also be weaving in Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. And instead of Levinas, I thought Kohelet was more better applied to this. The reason for this is that Kohelet or Ecclesiastes is actually, in my view, variations on the theme of creation. So he looks like the anti-creation man, right? Because he flips everything. But actually, when you really read him deeply, for me, he sounds like several variations on the theme of creation. Creation is omnipresent in that book, and he deepens those concepts. So I'm going to bring him at every turn along with Rosenzweig. They will be my 2 threads. A few words about Rosenzweig, because I assume most of us don't know about him. it's so sad because we just focus on boring philosophers like Hegel and Heidegger, and we miss the best ones like Kierkegaard and Rosenzweig, right? In fact, and they're not taught. You know, if you go to the canon, you have these solid guys from Germany, and you miss all the other ones. So Rosenzweig can be thought as the Jewish Kierkegaard. So if you love Kierkegaard, this is pure. This is the same. Same approach, same anti-Hegelianism. They both did their thesis on Hegel and then moved away from Hegel. So I really suggest you read him. The Star of Redemption is a masterpiece. It is a musical composition. It is based actually on the liturgical service in the synagogue. I'll talk about that in a second. But it's like hearing music to read Rosenzweig, really. So like I said, he started with Hegel. And he's taking over the theme of Hegel, which is the evolution of the spirit in human history. But as he was fighting the trenches of World War I, he realized he didn't give a damn about the evolution of the spirit in history, right? He realized, I don't care. I don't care. Right? Remember, for Hegel, the spirit evolves through war, through conflict. And Rosenzweig is in the trenches and he's like, I don't think I like this philosophy anymore, right? I don't want to be part of the evolution of the spirit while I'm here in the trenches, cold, freezing, sick, right? So he really moved away from Hegel, and what his topic became is the evolution of the human spirit, right? And what his whole book, The Star of Redemption, is really the movement of the human spirit, the growth, the development of the human spirit as it goes through 3 gates or 3 stages, right? And those make up the structure of the star. So the 3 stages are creation, revelation, redemption, right? And as we move through these 3 gates, we go deeper and deeper into who we ought to become, right? We develop more fully our humanity. So of course, the first gate is creation, which it is the one I will be focusing on. What's interesting is that, if just one last word on Rosenzweig, as we move through these 3 gates, we open up more and more. The definition of sin, or of, being in a state of non-redemption, is in the Hebrew Bible and in the Jewish tradition, is to be in a narrow space, right? When we are in a narrow space, we are in a state of non-redemptiveness. We are stuck in a narrow, self-enclosed space. And so you see a lot of the movements in Jewish philosophy and also in the biblical worldview is a movement of opening out of my self-enclosedness. And the more I'm open to the world, to others, is how I'm achieving or moving towards my redemption. Not achieve, right? So yeah, so that's a little bit just to give you a taste of Rosenzweig, to encourage you to read him. And then of course my other thread will be Kohelet. And I want to say a few words, just 30 seconds, why I believe is so important. And I'm so happy that we had a specialist in the Hebrew Bible who started out this conference on the human nature. I believe we have missed, it has been said, and I forgot who, but I think Zain would help me on that, that Western philosophy is founded on both Athens and Jerusalem. And so we study very deeply Plato and Aristotle, and we feel very, academic when we talk about Plato and Aristotle, but we don't feel so academic when we talk about Genesis or Job or Ecclesiastes. Why? Right? These are just as philosophical and profound texts, right, that need to be studied on the same level as Plato and Aristotle. And so that's why I shamelessly bring in Kohelet into this lecture, to this presentation. Okay, let's move into it. Now I have 15 minutes left. Okay. So, all right. So to remember creation, what does it mean? In a nutshell, to remember that we are creatures means this, that the world has been given to us, right? And before I continue, I want to say one little thing which I forgot, because I just remembered where I got this teaching from. I want to dedicate this presentation to my dad, whose birthday is today. Who is really the #1 scholar on creation. So it takes a lot of chutzpah for me to go and teach in his presence. So chutzpah is a Yiddish for insolence or audacity. Right? So, okay. So anyways, back to creation. To remember that we're creatures, in a nutshell, is to remember that the world has been given. One of the key words in Genesis about when the world is created is natan. Natan means to give. Right, and we see this keyword, by the way, in the book of Ecclesiastes everywhere too. Right, we remember this is the variations on the theme. So what does it mean to see the world as given? That is the question. And how does it make us dwell in the world differently to know that the world is given, right? Now, in the Western tradition, the world is not given, the world is conquered, right? From Descartes on, of course, the Greeks were smarter than that. They knew the world is given and they were in a state of perpetual wonder. But as soon as you get into modernity with people like Descartes, onto Kant, and then Heidegger, and then now onto whoever is doing philosophy, you have this notion that the world is conquered. Descartes speaks of the mastery and the possession of the world through reason, right? And so here we are, Westerners constantly trying to wrest resources from the world, to constantly striving, fighting to make a name for ourselves, to make an imprint, to succeed, to get the American dream, to get the degree, to get the home, to get the family. And here we are striving all day long to do this. And as Adventists, we are the king, queens of strivers. This is a thing, right? We love to work for the Lord, right? So here we are striving. And by the way, Kohelet doesn't escape this, right? Chapter 2, he's striving to build an empire. And we have the word that is used there, to acquire, is a leitmotif. I acquired this, I acquired that, I made it happen, right? And in the end, of course, he realizes, right? We'll see. Okay, so here we are striving, right? And most of us can do this for a lifetime, but actually, most of us, all of us, what am I saying? At one point, we'll face a wall, right? Where your strivings don't work. And you're beating your head against the wall and you realize, I can't do this, right? And at that moment, we are very tempted to give up or to become bitter or to just get angry and then just, go into some lower version of ourselves and stay there, right? And Kohelet himself hit a wall. We know that because in the end of his empire, when he had built everything, he says, actually, everything is breath. Hevel, right? Hevel, Havlim, Hakol, Hevel, right? This is the vanity of vanities, horrible translation, right? The real translation is breath. What is breath? Breath is something that you breathe and you cannot catch. That's how I define it, right? To define everything as breath is to define everything as out of your control. You cannot control your breath. It will come in and it will leave you and you cannot hold on to it, right? That, in my view, is what he means throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Basically what he is saying, you cannot control life. You thought you could control things, but you cannot control. And so now we can fall into despair, or we can remember that we are creatures. And so let us look at the two ways we can navigate this world of Hevel, this world of loss of control. There are two sections I'm going to look at: the gift of creation, and number 2, the limitation of creation. All right, 3 minutes for the gift of creation. All right, to remember that we're creatures, what does it mean? To remember that the world is a gift. Now, I want to emphasize that when God created the world, all of it was seen as good. And what we sometimes forget is that God created both the light and the darkness. All of it, kol, is supposed to be a gift given to us. And so we tend to think, oh, my blessings, God has blessed me. Right? When everything goes well, we go around saying, God has blessed me, and we're very vocal and visible in our blessing. But then when we are over there in a corner without any blessing, we tend to be like, we don't say God has blessed me, we just keep a low profile. Right? Hopefully it'll come. Why do we not say, God has blessed me with this situation? God has blessed me with this darkness. God has blessed me with this wilderness. God has blessed me with this dead end, right? This is such a powerful realization that to be creatures is really to welcome all of creation, not just a section of it, not just the day, but also the night, right? It's a beautiful moment in the Jewish liturgy where they say, where they speak this every morning. They say, God has created the morning and the evening, and both are to be embraced, right? And so I wonder, right, if we could, one of the ways, right, that we adopt this creature position is not to be sitting there as a judge of the universe saying, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, is to receive gratefully everything that comes our way. Kohelet understood this, and finally in Ecclesiastes 3, he's moving away from Ecclesiastes 2, where he says, everything, I love the NIV translation, everything has been made beautiful in its time. It's the best translation, I think, of that passage, right? Everything has been made beautiful in its time. All seasons are beautiful, right? And to really receive all seasons, right? So Rosenzweig speaks in this way of different ways of responding to the universe. And one of these ways is prayer, right? And so he talks about several different prayers, which we'll go over, which according to him, there are some poor prayers and some better prayers, right? There's quality in your prayers. There's a qualitative ladder you can climb. There are some pathetic prayers and there are some really noble prayers. So he's going to contrast here the sinner's prayer with that of the true believer. And for Rosenzweig, the problem with this, and so let me define the sinner's prayer. Sinner's prayer is a prayer most of us are praying all day long. God, give me. God, I don't have this, give me. And we're praying and begging God for something that we feel we do not have, right? And we're mostly crying over that thing. We are not praying with luminous faces, right? We are praying usually with downcast faces. We're feeling depressed about it and we're begging God. And then we try to influence God, if you do this, I'll do that. And, we try to be like, God, I'll use it for your purpose, and so forth. And we try to manipulate and force our way, right? And so in a way, in the Rosenzweig calls this the sinner's prayer. This is the most pathetic prayer you can pray, right? And why? So let's see what he has to say. I'm quoting from the Star of Redemption. Prayer for one's own benefit, number one, pathetic moment, right? The egotistical prayer, number two, pathetic moment, is not wrong, he says, in terms of content, for God wants man to have what belongs to him. So he's like, it's okay, you can continue to pray like that. It's not great, but it's not, it's not sinful, it's not wrong, even though he calls it the sinner's prayer. But then he adds, God has already given it to him, even before he can ask. To live in a state of creatureness is to realize the world is given. Now, it might not be given at exactly the time I want it to be given, but it's given. It's already there. It's part of my inheritance as a creature, right? And so he says, so he continues, right? That man, instead of treating the content of his prayer as already answered, since all is given, and thanking God, therefore, for his own being, he asks for it. And thus treats it as something still unanswered. And this is the key. For with this, he prays at the wrong time. He's asking for something God not ready to give him yet. Stop asking, just wait. We see it's there already. If you're a creature, that is what you're supposed to believe. The world is given, all of it, waiting for you. So stop scrambling for things out of time, right? You're out of step with God in a way, right? And so that would be the sinner's prayer versus the believer's prayer, which is gratefulness for all that is given at the time that it is given. I'm reminded here of Epictetus, who says, life is a banquet. When you're sitting in a banquet, are you telling the host, hey, I want dessert now? What the hell? What is this? Right? No, you wait until everything is given to you. You're not going to go tell the host, I need dessert now. This is unacceptable, right? No, you're going to have your entree and your thing and your whatever, the appetizer, entree, salad, soup, the whole course, right? And then dessert is coming, obviously, right? This is how we ought to live as creatures, according to Rosenzweig, right? Life is a banquet. And we ought to wait for the host to graciously give us the dessert at the right time, right? Okay, so that's the first thing, right? This is the believer opposed to the sinner's prayer. The believer's prayer is in time with divine timing. It's in time with God, is able to receive everything at the time when it is given. Okay, 5 minutes. Impossible task. Okay. The limitation of creation. Now, creation is abundance, but also limitation. We know that tree is there at the center, right? Tree of knowledge of good and evil. What does it mean, this tree? So philosophically, I'm trying to ponder this, right? I'm not going to go into the ethics and so forth. What I believe the tree, one of the meanings, there are many meanings, right? But one of the meanings one can give this tree is that it is the thirst for power. And we see that with Eve. She wants to be like God, power, right? The tree for me really represents the desire to control your own life versus to receive it from God. So Eve at that moment is going to disrupt the abundance of creation, disrupt the gift, and take what she wants at the time that she wants it, the fruit, right? Prematurely, of course, right? And so what I believe the tree is this desire in us to want to make our own destinies in our own way and in our own time. Right? We want our timing. I want this now, and I'm going to go get it. Watch me, right? So we want, and this is again, right? This is the notion of making our own name, our own destiny is found again in the book of Ecclesiastes too. Remember the variation on creation. Remember that God is the one who makes in Genesis. Asa, to make, is the attributed to God. God makes this, makes that, makes this. Ecclesiastes, you see now 5 times. I made. right? Ecclesiastes is building his empire. I made me temples. I made me, harems. I made me gardens. And so you have definitely here, he is rising up in the place of God and saying, I will make my own destiny. I'm not going to wait around until the creator comes around to remembering me and giving me what is my due, right? And so he makes, and we make also, right? We want to speed things up. I want this now. I'm going to go get it, right? I can't wait anymore. So I'm going to just rush into this. And I'm going to recklessly do this and go there and start this, right? And in that moment, when we are striving to make what we want happen when we want it, we are falling away from the state of the creature, right? And we're entering what Rosenzweig calls the prayer of the magician versus the prayer of the prophet. The magician is this. He has a very interesting definition of magic. Magic can be summarized as this, is the desire to bend reality to your will. That's magic. You cannot receive reality. You want to bend it to your will, right? And so he talks like this here about the magician, Star of Redemption. The magician actively intervenes against the course of the world. Magician waits. I'm going to do this now, right? He wants to snatch, to bully, to force from it by trick or force that which is unforeseen, that which is willed by its own will, right? How often do we do that, right? How often do we snatch? Do we prematurely take what is not ours, right? How often do we manipulate so we can get what we want? I live in New York City, and it's a culture of hustlers. Everybody lying on their applications, lying in their taxes, lying here in order to get, right, to fool the governments, to get that housing, to get that job. We all lying. Okay, this is the magician. Anytime you're lying on an application, thank you. Dude, you're kidding. Oh yeah, you're right. Anytime you're lying for anything to get what you are acting the magician. But in doing so, you're missing the gift that was meant to come your way, were you to stand back and wait for it. And so 2 ways we miss the gifts of creation. Number 1 way, we are not grateful for what we already have. And number 2, we are striving to get what is already waiting for us, but we will miss it because we're over here building our own empire, right? And so in so doing, right, we miss the miracle, says Rosenzweig. What is a miracle? A miracle is this. A miracle is something that God is doing when you stop doing, right? Finally, when you stop doing, finally, when you stop the asa, can God come and do his asa, right? And so that's what we see. Now, the prophet. How can I do the prophet in 1 minute? May I have 2 more minutes?
Let's open the discussion and find a way to.
You want me to? Okay, I will. Please, someone ask me the question on the prophet. It's the best part. It's the climax. Okay. All right. Conclusion. I have 1 minute. I see it. Okay. What does it mean to be a created being? It means this. It means we can relax. It means we can relax into life, knowing that life is abundance, that the world is full of surprises, interesting twists and turns, and know, like Ecclesiastes finally understood, that we can cast our bread on the waters, we can sow to the 4 winds, we can give away our hearts and our bodies, we can do all of this without even trying to attempt the outcome because it is not in our hands, right? We don't know what is going to happen, but as Ecclesiastes says so beautifully, God is working it out. As you do not know the path of the breath in the mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. And so God is taking the threads of our existence, the threads of our failures, just like the threads of our trespasses, our courageous actions, our cowardly actions, and weaving them into the tapestry of our lives. And so we can truly relax. As creatures, we ought to be relaxed. If you are not relaxed, you are not acting or standing in the world as a creature does, and you're missing whatever might come your way as you stand in that position. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like Abby to say more about the prophet.
Thank
you. Okay. Responses are limited to 2 minutes.
Oh, that's fine. I can do it. I'll skip the quote. Prophet basically has come to a still point. the prophet, I think mostly because life has brought him there. We don't naturally come to a still point. When you are crashed on the earth with your face in the dirt, you are at a still point. That's where the prophet is, right? Has come to a still point where he has no more words, he or she has no more words or actions of their own, right? Their will has become God's will. This is the rock bottom where you're like, you know what, do what you want. This is the point of the prophet, right? Their will has become God's will. And so the prophet can never conjure like the magician. He must wait, right? The prophet in a way then becomes fully aligned with the rhythms of creation. Right? He's receptive to the divine timing and the divine gifts, right? He knows the divine tempo, the divine timing, which is, by the way, if you're dancing with a partner, which you're not, I know that, right? Unless you're a renegade Christian, right? You can usually, as you're dancing, anticipate the next move they will make, right? If you're a good dancer, if you suck, you're the one leading, right? So, I mean, as a woman. So if you're a pretty good dancer, so you anticipate as a woman what the next move is, right? And so in this way, the prophet is able to anticipate because they're so in tempo with God, so aligned with God, they can anticipate the next move. And they can therefore rejoice and anticipate joyfully what is about to come. And that is the prayer of the prophet. I know you're about to do this, and I am so amazingly happy about that. Thank you.
All right.
That's the prayer. Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Go ahead.
I very much enjoyed the imagery of the banquet, waiting for the dessert to be served at the right time. But in this model, what if some spoiled food is served? What do you do?
I go back to Ecclesiastes 3. He has made everything beautiful in it. It's spoiled food in a way, right? You don't know it, first of all. You're judging it as spoiled, right? You don't know what it is. Tastes bad. You're thinking it's spoiled, but maybe it's medicine, right? I think that would say that. In all of those Stoics would say, maybe it's medicine. Whenever bitterness comes our way, right? This is also a gift. That is what it means to be truly a creature, is to recognize that even though the food feels spoiled to me, maybe it has probably has medicinal qualities, right?
So there's no evil in this model?
There is night and darkness. Evil is a third category. There's night and day, darkness and light, and evil is a third category, but often we make evil into night. Why? Right? I think that might be, I would venture to say, yes, there is evil, but very often when the night comes and when we are struggling with darkness, we call it evil. And we blame ourselves when it certainly may be just the night. Right.
All right. Go here.
You're welcome.
And then, yeah. Go.
So would you argue that this idea of receptivity is universally applicable or contextually applicable? And maybe I could word it, like, what's the difference between this and like harmful passivity, like from feminist theory, or, you know, someone after the Holocaust was supposed to go and say, well, how did you receive that? They're, you know, like, I don't feel comfortable.
So let me address the Holocaust question because it's the worst.
Sure.
How many of you are familiar with Corrie ten Boom? She's a Christian who saved some Jews during the Holocaust, and she ended up in a camp, right, with her sister. And she talks about her experience in this way that I'm talking about. It's very powerful. She has a moment where they're in a bunker. Is a bunker, these things with beds? Is that called a bunker? Yeah. So they're in a bunker, and their bunker becomes infested by fleas. And she's in this, you know, this kind of vibe of, I'm going to praise God for everything, you know, and everybody's making fun of her. But she's like, no, I'm going to thank God even for the fleas, right? Because she realized that because of the fleas, the guards would not step into that bunker and they could continue their daily Bible study. And so she was, I mean, this is not me saying it, and I have not been through the Holocaust, so I don't have the authority. She's talking through me. She is saying, even in the Holocaust, you can be praising God and receiving. And by the way, if you read, what's her name? Oh my God, Hilden Soon. This is a woman who was also in a camp. Her attitude is so full of wonder, you know. So I think even in the worst situation, you can have that creature stance.
But does that negate then pushing back? Is it like,
No,
we
yeah.
should just accept all these things, or we should actually say no more Holocaust? We can receive it somehow, but let's not do that.
We can do all things. Doing is a gift, knowing that ultimately the result is not in our hands. That's what it means to not strive, right? Asa is the divine, right? But we can do all kinds of activities, you know, knowing that in the end, the true asa, the conclusion, the result is not in our hands in that sense.
My question has to continues a little bit as this idea. And I'm talking especially from the point of view of a father and a pastor. So when I had my first child, for me was a total spiritual experience. My theology shifted completely, and I understood finally how God must love me, because He must love me so much more than I love my son. But as a father, when I give him things, I don't want to be giving him everything. When I do puzzles with him, okay? He's 8 now, and now my daughter's 4, and when I do puzzles with her, I don't show her, this is the piece, this is the piece, this is the piece. I let her do the things. And then if she doesn't see one, then maybe I push her in the right direction, but I still don't show her everything. So then my question is, shouldn't there be a balance? And if there should, which is it between this waiting for the receiving and the action that you want to do? And one last thing, as a pastor, I've seen this passivity, the negative that Andrew talks about, and it's just decimating the will of my members.
Okay, I got you. Thank you. Thank you. This is a really good question. I think you're right. You're right. I agree with you. I think we need to see it like that. God can only move if we've made a move. That's why I tell my students, and this is maybe wrong advice, maybe I'll regret it, but I tell them, listen, just do something. Even if it's the wrong thing, do it. And then Providence can step in and open and close doors. But if you're sitting there on your couch watching Netflix all day eating potato chips, nothing's going to happen. We need to make a move knowing that ultimately then we have to respond. Door closed, door open, right? So this is kind of close to what Ecclesiastes is talking about, is action and non-action. That is from Taoism. You move in response to your environment rather than dictating to your environment. So yes, God cannot do any asa if we are sitting there doing nothing. We have to make a move, even if it's a wrong move, and then God can begin orienting that move. So yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, got Bogdan and then several others here on the, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to appreciate the enthusiasm of the presentation and the idea of waiting until it is given. We see at the beginning of the Bible, we have given a garden, and the garden is a good place to live with God. And I would connect this with Matilda's presentation, the context that gives us identity. Now, people along the time try to build a city, to build power, Nimrod, Cain, then Babylon, Nineveh, and every time it goes wrong. But in the end, God creates a city. It's the New Jerusalem.
I've always wondered about
so
that.
when God is giving it, now it becomes good. How do you see this?
Why did God decide to give us a city?
New York.
I have actually wondered also, to be honest, I've wondered why it's a New Jerusalem is a city, because it goes against the whole biblical, critique of the city. And when the Tower of Babel is built, by the way, the word to make a name for ourselves is the word asa is used again in the term of same idea of replacing God, right? So there's two types of cities, maybe the city that we build and the city that we receive. So then we're back into garden theology, like I call it. When we are receiving the city, we are still in the garden approach of, or creation approach of receiving. So perhaps the city that we receive is okay.
Yeah.
That's my cop out.
All right.
It's an encouragement for those who live in the city.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Yishin.
So, thank you so much, Abi, for your wonderful contribution. And I kind of wanted to dovetail on some of the things that's already been said about the central theme of the paper. The dichotomy seems to be control versus grateful receptivity, right?
More or less.
And some of the questioners have already brought up the issue of human agency, right? And as a philosopher and someone who works with victims of survivors of trauma, right? One of the things that we try to do is to help people reclaim a sense of agency, right? And so I wanted to kind of just ask you to speak more on how do we know when we have drifted from a kind of dancing receptivity and agency towards control? At what point do I know now I've drifted too far? Because it can be really hard to distinguish the two in our lived experience, right? And as you said at the beginning, in Adventism, we often say, I'm here to serve the Lord, and that means there's no boundaries for what we do, right? In our jobs, in our pastoring, in our ministry. And then a lot of times people justify that maybe self-exploitation or even the exploitation of others on the basis that I'm doing something good for God, framing it in language of receptivity. So how do we know we've drifted there?
The reason y'all are all asking me the same question
Yeah.
is that you're Westerners. There.
No,
Westerners,
that's
the
too
action
easy.
is always.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna let me finish. We have a sense in the East of acting in alignment. And that, in my view, is agency. Bergson has spoken about it, and Bergson has been moved out of the canon, like Rosenzweig and Kierkegaard, right? These are all the best ones. Bergson says true agency, true freedom is acting in alignment with what he calls the élan vital, or the vital impulse. It's acting in agency with acting in attunement with the movement of life, right?
Yeah.
And that is freedom, to act in attunement. This is also the thinking of the Tao Te Ching, right? Control is you're moving against that current, right? And so, yes, and so the sign you're in control, by the way, is that you're frustrated and depressed. That's the sign, right? Agency, listen, when I'm teaching philosophy, I am in full action, right? But I'm completely joyful because I'm aligned. It is not me teaching, I'm being taught through. Something is being taught through me. I'm in alignment with something greater than myself. It's pure freedom, right? But it's a different sense of freedom as, oh, I'm doing what I want. It's a much larger definition of freedom, which we're not used to. And that's why we're struggling with what I'm saying, right? This is action in alignment, which is very easy in the East. And also Ecclesiastes is talking about that. Does that answer your question?
There are a lot of conquerors who are not depressed. They're also very much.
You don't know that.
They enjoy the fight, right? There are people who enjoy that. So what do we do with that?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But maybe they're acting in alignment. I mean, they're called the hero in the Rosenzweig and in Kierkegaard. This is the hero figure, which is acting in alignment with something greater. That's what makes them heroic, right? So they are in alignment. But it's still a smaller destiny than the prophet, who is in full alignment with that. So yes, there's joy. Anytime you're in alignment with something greater, there is joy, pure agency, pure freedom. It's a different type of action than we're used to, right?
Big ambiguity. The Trump supporters think he's in alignment, and others don't.
We're still not going there. We're still not going there. How did he come up here?
Go ahead.
You were making your point against a culture of grasping, and I was remembering a very interesting concept of Hartmut Rosa, feedback, because that is what we need to get back to the unavoidability of life. And so, in the line you were saying, but I have to show critical consideration. It appears to me that you are proposing a unique model, and I instead believe that there must be place for a plurality of models, grasping or receiving. Second, you are comparing in an asymmetrical way a bad form of grasping with a good form of receiving, but this is atypical because there are good and bad forms of both.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yes, no, let me not. No, because receiving is different from sitting and resignation. I think Kierkegaard talks about that, right? The knight of faith is receiving. The resigned, whatever he calls it, the saint, I think, who is resigned. He's just sitting there, right? So receiving is quite active because it's hopeful. Hope is an action. Hope is creative. Marcel, Kierkegaard, Rosenzweig all talk about hope as an action, right? So I would say that no, receiving is always good, and it is active. It is an action. It is a positioning that's not easy to do versus those other passive forms which belong to another category than receiving, right? And so in that sense, I stand by my dichotomy here.
I have down Matthew, David, Jim, and Sigve. You're wanting to speak, get on the list now. I'll get you then. No, at the end. Okay, Matthew.
So thank you for the paper. And again, I should add to what I'm sure everyone here thinks it's a given, the wonderful style of presentation, engagement to get us all.
Great to have your energy back.
Really
helpful.
But so a few comments, bear with me here as I cite a few things. It's up to you to what you draw. And I wouldn't expect you to answer all of it together or individually. I am concerned to a certain degree that Jesus becomes the prayer of the magician rather than the prophet in the gospel account, say like Mark, where Jesus is pleading with God in Mark to change the outcome in Greek, and is complaining that he's been forsaken on the cross. And given the centrality of that event to Christian faith, that would, I guess it perturbs me in some sense, or makes me unsure of where I'm standing there. What does that have? What implications would that have? And then likewise, if I think about in the Gospel of John with Mary, his mother saying we need something, some miracle to happen, we're out of wine. And he says, my hour is not yet. But Mary does not take that answer. She does not receive it. She goes to the servants and says, go back, he's going to do it anyway. And sure enough, it turns out it was the hour, and Jesus has acted. Or take Jacob. Jacob is attacked at the Jabbok River. He had been promised a blessing in like chapter 28, but now he's receiving what looks more like the anti-blessing. He doesn't receive it when he gets the sunlight rising, and he can tell. He instead insists on the blessing. And so I guess to a certain degree, and what's kind of what everyone's getting at here is, where's the line, and especially with the sense of Kohelet, he's famous for having so much in common with nihilism. With this, when he talks about the animal and the human, they all go to the grave alike, oh, well, life is what it is, but we still live it. But how do you avoid falling into that sense of, well, even if God's giving it, I guess I got to accept it, even if I find it problematic, versus I have to push back to get the blessing.
Brilliant. You have found my blind spot. Well done. I'm going to address two of those things, which I think I still stand, but that one, which you mentioned with Jacob wresting his blessing from God, because that's what he does throughout his life, is take, right? And God praises him for it. Thank you. Oh my God, I'm flipping. He praises him for fighting with God and man, wrestling with God and man. So I'm going to put that and think about it. I love
he's
it.
going to be talking about it in the next
But
talk.
I'm going to answer the Jesus prayer, because I think I can still make it work with but thank you. That was great. That's going to help me. The prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's saying, please take the cup away. You realize how he finishes the prayer, right? Not my will, but thy will. So this is the prayer of the prophet, right? So he starts out the magician, he's wrestling with the magician and the sinner's prayer, and he eventually is able to release the prophet's prayer, where not my will, but thy will.
Does it
right?
have to be a dichotomy? Or could
You're right.
Could they be integrated?
You could. I'm going to put that in the blind spots drawer. Now, the one with on the cross, which I think has been misinterpreted, the Psalm 22 that he recites, you have to realize he's quoting a whole psalm, right? And when you read the psalm, which we never do, we just stay with the my God, you see it's a psalm of victory. Right. And so, and remember, that's how they taught. They would quote here and there. Everyone knew the whole text. So when he's quoting, everyone has the whole psalm photographically downloaded in their minds, right? Because they knew the Bible by heart. So I believe that's a cry of victory, not a cry of defeat. But yeah.
Just in the sake of our Adventist context, would it be something that to wrestle with if you knew that if we bring into conversation Ellen White, who says that it's a betrayal to argue that he had hope in his heart? That when he declares the psalm that he's feeling, I'm not, regardless of how we evaluate how to use Ellen White, but it's interesting in the Adventist tradition.
Yeah, I believe the Bible can be read, there can be multiple interpretations of one text, not infinite, there's wrong interpretations, but there's also correct ones that can be opposite, right? So this is how the rabbis read the Bible, right? So I don't have a problem with her saying that. I embrace it, just like I embrace your critique. I think I need to bring those together, and I think we can bring those together. It's despair in the hope. You don't hope without despair, right? So out of the despair comes the hope of the end. Like David was always oscillating, right? So I would say it like that, right? Yeah. Thank you. That was great.
Try to keep it short now, David.
Yeah, thanks. I hope that when I grow up, I can preach like you teach. I found all these resonances in my mind to the Sabbath when you went through this as a practice, where we like literally practice being in this rhythm with God, and that the coming of the evening and the morning and all this. So does Rosenzweig do this as well?
Oh my God!
Connected with the Sabbath.
Thank you for asking that. Y'all need to go at one point in your lives to a synagogue service and see the three gates unravel in the synagogue service. You have the prayers of creation, the prayers of revelation, the prayers of redemption. They follow the same rhythm. So yes, every morning, Saturday morning, Friday night, they go through this. So it's a beautiful experience. If you want to truly understand Rosenzweig, you have to go. Rosenzweig is a cantor. He has been called the cantor of modern philosophy. So it's, yes, absolutely. There is that rhythm that he comes out in his writing, right? Beautiful. But I love the connections you had with the Sabbath. And I think we could now explore more. I think it has enriched our practice of the Sabbath to see some of these things. Thank you. That's great. Yeah.
I'm gonna skip to Sigbay because you've spoken before. Sigbay.
I just wonder about, thank you for a very enlightening presentation. I wonder about the notion of God creating light and darkness. Maybe that is a Kohelet type of vision of creation, but it is not Genesis. There is darkness first, and then God creates light and separates the light.
But day and night, though, right?
So then, my point, just to try to make my point here, I am not as eager to embrace the darkness as you're talking to do, and to be able to accommodate even a snippet of the Holocaust inside that darkness. I would like to push back a little on that. I think your mention of Torah and bones is we have to respect those kinds of comments. There are similar Jewish comments from Viktor Frankl, from Edith Egger, but there is a host of others who will not be as eager to polarize it like that. And from a New Testament perspective, the darkness will end. There shall be no more night.
Eternal light.
What I wish to push for here is, yes, in the wisdom literature and Kohelet also, is it optimistic? Is it nihilistic? Is it pessimistic? I don't know yet if they are, which of those they are. But there is in the theological community a tendency to think that the wisdom literature returns an aesthetic answer to an ethical problem. And I have a tiny bit of a sense that you might do that too. In which case it would be an unsuccessful theodicy. So, anyway, just to make some comments.
Okay, good. I need to go into that. The light out of the darkness. I'm curious. It is out of the darkness. I'm trying to remember the text. And then the eternal light, this stumps me a bit. So I'm going to save myself with the notion of day and night, evening and morning. I think that's what perhaps, yeah, so in that sense, perhaps we can read the book of Ecclesiastes as accepting the night as much as we accept the morning. And yes, I think I agree with you. There has to be a separate dimension for the choshech, this darkness of evil, of tohu vabohu, which is the chaos darkness, right? No, I'm not going to call it darkness. I'm going to call it chaos, which the Greeks talked about also, right? You have the world of the cosmos, which is in a balance of opposites, which we need to embrace. And then you have the chaos, right, which is outside of this world, which is the realm of evil, or tohu vabohu in the tradition of the Hebrews, which is a separate dimension and which continuously infiltrates both the day and the night. You can have terrible evil in the day also, not just in the night, right? So I wouldn't say that just light, right? And let's leave light out of it. Let's stay with day because that's more accurate, right? So yes, so I still think it holds in the sense of embracing the night and the day, knowing that this tohu vabohu, this chaos, can infiltrate both. You can have an extremely successful existence, be very happy, and be at the climax of evil. We know this, right? We've seen people like that, right? So you can have this evil infiltrate both the day and the night, but I still think Ecclesiastes, it works in the sense of embracing both the day and the night as good, right? So does that help a little bit to clarify that it's not light and darkness? You're right, but it's day and night.
I'm going to have to rule that I think the last two questions, I'll put you on the first to be able to respond to the next, or you can come back to it if we have time. But we're a little over, and I want to thank you again for bringing your energy back to us.
You're welcome.